Some photographs become history. Others become legends because they were never allowed to exist. Imagine a Hollywood ballroom filled with stars, producers, musicians, and photographers. Crystal chandeliers glowing above hundreds of guests. Champagne flowing. An orchestra playing softly. And then, Marilyn Monroe walks through the doors. Minutes later, Elvis Presley takes her hand. They step onto the dance floor. The cameras rise. The entire room watches. And for one impossible moment, two of the most famous people in America forget that they're famous. But then a camera flashes. Marilyn sees it. Her smile disappears. She looks directly at the photographer and says, "No more photographs." Why? Because she knows exactly what Hollywood does with moments it doesn't understand. This is a fictional what-if story. A story about a night that never happened exactly as described. But perhaps it reveals something real about two people who lived inside the same strange prison. Fame. Hollywood looked perfect that night. Inside the ballroom, everything glittered. Crystal chandeliers. Expensive gowns. Dark suits. Champagne glasses. Famous faces everywhere. Actors laughed. Producers whispered about movies. Photographers searched for the next image that could become tomorrow's headline. Then the doors opened. Marilyn Monroe entered. The room changed instantly. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. Cameras rose. "Marilyn." She smiled. Flash. "Over here." Another flash. She laughed. She posed. She thanked people for compliments. She played the role perfectly. Marilyn Monroe. The blonde icon. The beautiful smile. The woman everyone thought they knew. But whenever people turned away, the smile disappeared. She wasn't looking for attention. She was looking for somewhere to breathe. Then she saw him. Across the ballroom. Elvis Presley. Dark hair. Immaculate suit. Surrounded by people. Yet somehow alone. Their eyes met. Neither smiled. Neither moved. For a few seconds, the ballroom seemed strangely quiet. Marilyn had seen famous men before. Elvis had seen beautiful women before. But something about this was different. Elvis wasn't looking at Marilyn the way everyone else did. He wasn't looking at the photograph. He was looking at the person. And Marilyn had the strange feeling that he understood something about her without knowing her at all. Elvis had noticed the same thing. He knew what it meant to become a name instead of a person. He watched Marilyn smile at the crowd. Then he noticed what happened whenever she turned away. The smile vanished. He knew that expression because he had worn it himself. Someone beside him was talking. Elvis wasn't listening. His eyes remained on Marilyn. Then she started walking toward him. The whispers began. Marilyn stopped in front of him. "You're Elvis Presley." He smiled. "And you're Marilyn Monroe." She laughed. "Everybody already knows that." Elvis glanced around. "That's the problem." Her expression softened. "You don't like being watched." "Not all the time." Marilyn looked around the room. "I don't either." The orchestra began a slower song. Couples moved onto the dance floor. Marilyn glanced toward them. Then back at Elvis. "I've heard you're a good dancer." Elvis raised an eyebrow. "Who told you?" "Everyone." "You believe them?" "No." She extended her hand. "Then prove them wrong." Elvis looked at her hand. Then smiled. "Are you challenging me?" "Maybe." He took her hand. Then let's go. The ballroom reacted immediately. People stopped talking. Heads turned. Photographers moved closer. Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley were dancing. Together. At first they moved slowly, gracefully, almost normally. Marilyn smiled. You know, I expected more. More what? Elvis Presley. You'll have to wait. She laughed. Then the rhythm changed. Elvis became more playful. Marilyn followed. She tried to imitate one of his movements and deliberately exaggerated it. The crowd laughed, then applauded. Marilyn laughed too. And for the first time that evening, it wasn't an act. She was genuinely having fun. Elvis noticed. He smiled. For a few minutes, the cameras didn't matter. Neither did Hollywood. There was only music. Then Elvis looked toward the crowd. His smile disappeared. Marilyn noticed immediately. What happened? Nothing. You're lying. He looked back at her. Sometimes everybody knows your name. He paused. And nobody knows you. Marilyn stopped moving. The words hit her. She looked around the ballroom. Hundreds of people knew Marilyn Monroe. But how many knew the woman behind the name? She looked back at Elvis. Sometimes I wish they'd stop looking. He nodded. So do I. And suddenly the dance changed. It wasn't a performance anymore. It was a conversation without words. The music continued. They moved slowly. Marilyn looked at him. Do you ever wonder what it would be like if nobody knew us? All the time. What would you do? Drive somewhere. Where? Anywhere nobody knows Elvis Presley. She smiled. I'd go somewhere near the ocean. Why? Because the ocean doesn't care who you are. Elvis laughed. That sounds like you. She looked at him. What about you? What? If there were no Elvis Presley, who would you be? He hesitated. I don't know. Marilyn nodded. Neither do I. They looked at each other. Then she smiled. So we're both lost. Looks like it. At least we're lost together. For a moment, Elvis didn't answer. Then he smiled. And they kept dancing. Not as legends. Not as celebrities. Just as two people who had finally found someone who understood. Across the room, a photographer had been watching. He knew what made a photograph valuable. Not fame. Not glamour. Emotion. And what he was seeing now was something Hollywood almost never captured. Marilyn had forgotten the cameras. Elvis had forgotten the audience. The photographer raised his camera. He focused. Marilyn looked at Elvis. Elvis smiled. The chandelier light fell across them. The shutter clicked. Flash. Marilyn froze. She turned. She saw the camera. Another photographer raised his. Flash. Marilyn stepped away. No. The room became silent. Elvis looked at her. Why? She looked around. Then at the cameras. They'll turn this into something it isn't. They'll create a story, Elvis said. Yes. What story? Marilyn gave a sad smile. They'll say we're in love. She paused. Or that we're having a secret affair. Elvis shook his head. And the truth? Marilyn looked directly into his eyes. The truth is much simpler. What is it? Her voice became almost a whisper. We were lonely. Elvis said nothing. Marilyn continued. And for a few minutes. She smiled. We weren't. The words stayed between them. No one else heard. But Elvis understood. Completely. The orchestra began its final passage. Marilyn and Elvis remained together. She looked at him. Do you think we'd have liked each other if we'd met before we were famous? Elvis smiled. Maybe. Maybe. I think we'd have danced. She laughed softly. Even then. Especially then. The music ended. Applause filled the ballroom. But neither moved. They were still holding hands. Finally, Marilyn whispered, "Thank you." For what? For making me forget who I was. Elvis smiled. You're welcome. She slowly released his hand, then walked away. Elvis watched her disappear into the crowd. But before she reached the doors, Marilyn stopped. She turned. Their eyes met. She smiled. Elvis smiled back. Then she was gone. The ballroom slowly emptied. The orchestra packed away its instruments. Guests left. The lights dimmed. But Elvis remained on the dance floor. He looked at the place where Marilyn had stood. Outside, Hollywood continued as if nothing had happened. Nobody knew. Except one person. The photographer. He still had the photograph. One image. Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley. Dancing. Together. He knew what it could become. A magazine cover. A fortune. A piece of history. But then he remembered Marilyn's words. They'll turn this into something it isn't. He was about to leave when he heard footsteps. He turned. Marilyn stood behind him. She looked at the camera. Do you still have it? He nodded. Yes. Please don't publish it. Why? She looked toward the empty dance floor. Because that was the only moment tonight when I wasn't Marilyn Monroe. She paused. And I don't want the world to take it away. The photographer lowered his eyes. I understand. Marilyn smiled faintly. Thank you. She walked away. A moment later, another voice came from behind him. Did she ask you to destroy it? The photographer turned. Elvis stood there. Yes, the photographer answered. Elvis looked at the camera. Then toward the door. Then destroy it. The photographer stared at him. You know what this picture could be worth. I know. Then why? Elvis looked toward the empty dance floor. Because some things are worth more when nobody owns them. He turned to leave. Then stopped. If anyone ever asks what happened tonight. The photographer waited. Tell them we danced. Elvis walked away. The photographer looked down at the camera. He knew what he was supposed to do. But he couldn't. Not yet. He removed the photograph. He looked at it one final time. And there it was. Not two celebrities. Not two legends. Just two lonely people smiling at each other. He couldn't destroy it. Instead, he hid it. Somewhere nobody would think to look. And for decades, the world would believe that the moment had disappeared. But it hadn't. Not completely. Because years later, someone would find the photograph. And on the back of it were 6 handwritten words. They met again, I was there. And suddenly, the photograph would raise a question no one could answer. If Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley had met again, why had nobody ever heard about it? The photograph should have disappeared. That was the promise. Marilyn had asked for it. Elvis had agreed. The photographer had every reason to destroy it. Yet he didn't. He hid it instead. And for years, nobody knew it existed. But a photograph has a strange kind of power. It can sit in darkness for decades and still wait for the right person to find it. This is a fictional continuation of our imagined story. And now the question becomes more dangerous. If Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley really met again, why did nobody know? The photographer kept the photograph hidden for years. Not in a gallery, not in a safe, not in a place where anyone would think to search. It remained inside an old envelope at the back of a locked drawer. There were no names written on it, no date, no explanation, only one photograph. Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, dancing beneath a chandelier. The image was almost painfully beautiful. Marilyn wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking at Elvis. And Elvis wasn't looking at the crowd. He was looking at her. There was no performance in their faces. No Hollywood smile. No carefully chosen pose. They looked relieved. That was the word the photographer had written on the back. They looked relieved. Every time he opened the drawer, he remembered the same night. The music, the laughter, Marilyn's voice, Elvis telling him to destroy the photograph, and the promise he had made. But years passed. Hollywood changed. New stars appeared. New scandals replaced old ones. The world moved forward. Yet the photograph remained. Until one evening, the photographer received unexpected news. Marilyn Monroe wanted to see him. Again. She arrived quietly. No photographers. No crowd. No announcement. Just Marilyn stepping through a private doorway, wearing a simple coat and dark glasses. The photographer looked surprised. "I didn't expect you." "I know." She removed her glasses. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Marilyn smiled. "Do you still have it?" The photographer knew immediately what she meant. He hesitated. "Yes." Her smile disappeared. "You didn't destroy it." "No." She looked down. "I asked you to." "I know." "Why didn't you?" He thought about it. "Because I couldn't." Marilyn walked toward the window. Outside, Hollywood was glowing. She watched the city for several seconds. "Do you know what I remember most about that night?" The photographer waited. "The dance." She shook her head. "Elvis." The photographer said nothing. Marilyn smiled faintly. He was the first person in a long time who didn't seem interested in Marilyn Monroe. What did he seem interested in? She looked back. "Me." The photographer understood. Then Marilyn asked, "Have you seen him since that night?" "Yes." Her expression changed. "When?" The photographer hesitated, and that hesitation made her nervous. "Tell me." He finally answered. "A few months after the party." Marilyn stared at him. "Where?" "Somewhere private." She took a breath. "Did he ask about me?" The photographer nodded. "What did he say?" "He asked whether you were all right." Marilyn looked away. That simple question seemed to affect her more than anything else. "He asked if I was all right." "Yes." She smiled. "He shouldn't have cared." "Maybe he did." Marilyn looked toward the city again. Then whispered, "Maybe I cared too." Several months after the ballroom, Elvis received an unexpected message. No name. No explanation. Just an address. A quiet place far from the center of Hollywood. He arrived alone. There were no cameras. No reporters. No crowd. He walked toward the entrance. And then he saw her. Marilyn Monroe. She was standing beside a window. When she turned, Elvis smiled. "You came. You asked. I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I." She laughed softly. For a moment, they simply stood there. It was strange seeing each other, without hundreds of people watching. Without music. Without photographers. Without the pressure of being interesting. Marilyn looked at him. "This feels different." "How?" "No one is starring." Elvis smiled. "Give it time." She laughed, then became serious. "I've thought about that night." "So have I." "What do you remember?" He answered immediately. "You laughing." She smiled. "I laughed a lot." "You were actually happy." Her expression softened. "And you? What about me? Were you happy?" Elvis thought. For a few minutes. Marilyn looked at him. "So was I." Silence. Then she asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met earlier?" "All the time." She smiled. "Before fame. Before everything. What do you think?" Elvis shrugged. "Maybe we'd have been friends. Maybe. Maybe more." Marilyn looked at him. Neither smiled. Then she broke the tension with a quiet laugh. "You're dangerous." "I've been told." They spent the evening talking. Not about movies. Not about music. Not about fame. They talked about ordinary things. Places they wanted to visit. Songs they liked. Food they missed. The kind of lives they imagined having if nobody knew their names. Marilyn admitted she sometimes dreamed about disappearing. Elvis understood. "I don't want to disappear forever," she said. "What do you want?" She thought. "I just want one day when nobody expects anything from me." Elvis nodded. "I'd like that too." She looked at him. "Maybe that's why I called you." "Why?" "Because you understand." He smiled. "So do you." Outside, the city continued glowing. Inside, the two most recognizable people in the room were trying to imagine what it felt like to be invisible. Then Marilyn noticed something. A piano stood in the corner. She walked toward it. "You play?" "A little." She sat beside it. "Play something." "What?" "Anything." Elvis sat down. His fingers touched the keys. The first notes were quiet. Marilyn listened. There were no cameras. No audience. No applause. Just music. And somehow, the scene reminded her of the ballroom. She smiled. "What?" "Nothing." "You're smiling." "I remembered the dance." Elvis looked at her. "So did I." She stood, then extended her hand. "Again." He smiled. "Here." "Why not?" He took her hand, and they began to dance. Not beneath chandeliers this time. Not in front of Hollywood. Just in a quiet room. Two people moving slowly to music. No audience. No cameras. No expectations. Marilyn rested her head briefly against his shoulder. "This is better." "Why?" "Because nobody knows." Elvis looked at her. "Maybe that's what makes it special." She nodded. But someone was watching. Neither of them knew. Outside the building, a car had been parked across the street. Inside it sat a man with a camera. He had followed Marilyn. Not because he knew where she was going. Because he had noticed something. She had been meeting someone. And Hollywood photographers were very good at following secrets. The man lifted his camera. Through the window, he saw them. Marilyn, Elvis, together again. He couldn't believe it. He took a photograph. Click. Then another. Click. Inside, Marilyn suddenly stopped. She looked toward the window. Did you hear that? Elvis turned. What? I thought I heard something. They walked toward the glass. But the car outside was already moving. Marilyn stared into the darkness. Her expression changed. Someone saw us. Elvis looked at her. Are you sure? I don't know. She took a breath. Then whispered. This is exactly what I was afraid of. The next morning, the photographer from the ballroom received a phone call. No greeting. No introduction. Just one sentence. Someone has another photograph. He froze. What photograph? Them. His stomach tightened. Where? I don't know. Who has it? I don't know. The line went dead. He immediately opened the drawer. The original photograph was still there. He stared at it. Then he understood. The photograph he had hidden was no longer the only photograph. Someone else had seen them. Someone else had captured them. And this time, Marilyn didn't know. Elvis didn't know. And nobody had asked the photographer to protect the image. That evening, Marilyn received a call. She answered quietly. Hello. No one spoke. Then a man's voice. You should be more careful. Her expression changed. Who is this? I have something you don't want the public to see. Her heart began beating faster. What? A photograph. Silence. Of you and Elvis. Marilyn closed her eyes. Where did you get it? That doesn't matter. What do you want? The man laughed. Now we're having a conversation. Marilyn gripped the phone. Listen to me. You listen to me. What do you want? I'll tell you tomorrow. The line went dead. Marilyn remained still. The room suddenly felt colder. She knew what a photograph could do. She knew what Hollywood could do with a story. And this wasn't a photograph from a public ballroom. This was private. This was different. If the picture became public, people wouldn't simply talk about a dance. They would invent everything. They would create romance, scandal, secrets. They would turn a private friendship into something neither of them had agreed to. She immediately called Elvis. He answered. Hello. It's me. His voice softened. What's wrong? Someone has a photograph. Silence. Of us. He understood immediately. From tonight. Yes. Who? I don't know. What do they want? Money, probably. Elvis became quiet. Then said, Don't give them anything. Marilyn's voice trembled. What if they publish it? Then we'll deal with it. You don't understand. I do. No. She took a breath. They won't tell the truth. Elvis said nothing. They'll turn it into something ugly. I know. They'll say things about us. I know. They'll say we were. Marilyn. She stopped. Elvis spoke calmly. Whatever happens, they don't get to decide what happened. She closed her eyes. Why are you so calm? Because I'm tired of being afraid of cameras. That sentence made her emotional. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then, I'm glad I met you. Elvis smiled. Me too. The next day, the mysterious photographer arrived. He brought the photograph. He placed it on the table. Marilyn looked at it. Her face went pale. It wasn't the ballroom photograph. It was the second meeting. Marilyn and Elvis standing together near the window. Not dancing. Not touching. Just looking at one another. But the angle made it look intimate. Too intimate. The photographer smiled. Beautiful, isn't it? Marilyn stared at the photograph. No. He looked surprised. It's worth a fortune. No. Why? Because you don't know what you're looking at. He laughed. I know exactly what I'm looking at. No. She picked up the photograph. You know what you want people to think you're looking at. The photographer leaned forward. You're famous, Marilyn. People want stories. She put the photograph down. Then find another story. He smiled. You know that's not how Hollywood works. Marilyn stared at him. For a moment, the frightened woman disappeared. The star returned. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. How much? He named a number. Marilyn looked at him. Then laughed. You think money solves this? It solves most things. No. She pushed the photograph back toward him. It doesn't. Then what does? Marilyn looked directly into his eyes. The truth. He laughed again. Hollywood doesn't care about truth. She stood. Then perhaps Hollywood needs to learn. But the situation was about to become much bigger. Because the photographer wasn't working alone. The photograph had already been shown to someone else. A magazine editor. And the editor had seen something in it. Not merely Marilyn. Not merely Elvis. A story. A massive story. He wanted more. He wanted proof. He wanted another photograph. He wanted to know where they met. He wanted to know how often they met. And suddenly, the secret dance had become something neither Marilyn nor Elvis could control. Someone was watching. Someone was following. Someone was waiting. And the photographer from the first night knew it. He looked at the old photograph in his drawer. Then at the new one. 2 photographs. 2 moments. 2 secrets. And he realized something terrifying. The first photograph had captured the moment they met. The second had captured the moment they met again. If a third photograph existed, Hollywood would know there was a story. And somewhere, another camera was already waiting. That evening, Elvis received another message. 1 sentence. Tomorrow night, same place. He stared at it. Then looked toward the window. Something felt wrong. He called Marilyn. She answered immediately. Did you get it? Yes. Are you going? I don't know. You shouldn't. I agree. Silence. Then Elvis asked. Marilyn. Yes. Do you regret meeting me? There was a long pause. No. Even now. No. Her voice became softer. Especially now. Elvis smiled. Good. But there's something you need to know. What? I think someone is following us. Elvis looked toward the dark window. I think you're right. Neither spoke. Then Marilyn whispered. What do we do? Elvis answered. We disappear. She laughed nervously. Where? Somewhere nobody knows us. Marilyn remembered their conversation from the first night. The ocean. A place where nobody cared who they were. She smiled. Maybe I know a place. Where? You'll have to trust me. I do. The next morning, Marilyn left quietly. No announcement. No assistants. No photographers. Elvis followed later. They were careful, but they didn't know something. A car had already noticed them. The same photographer. The same camera. The same secret. He followed them out of Hollywood. Toward the coast. Toward the place Marilyn had once described. A place where the ocean didn't care who you were. And as the sun began to disappear beneath the horizon, Marilyn stepped out of the car. She looked at the ocean, then at Elvis. For the first time in days, she smiled. "We made it." Elvis looked around. "No cameras. None that I can see." He laughed. "That's good enough." They walked toward the water. The wind moved through Marilyn's hair. Elvis stood beside her. Neither spoke. Then Marilyn whispered, "Maybe this is what normal feels like." Elvis smiled. "Maybe." She looked at him. "Promise me something." "What?" "If we ever lose this." She paused. "Don't let them tell us what it was." Elvis nodded. "I promise." Then, from somewhere behind them, came the sound of a camera. Click. Marilyn froze. Elvis turned. On the distant road stood a man, camera in hand. And this time, he wasn't running. He was smiling, because he had finally captured the photograph he had been waiting for. Marilyn looked at Elvis. Her face went pale. The photographer raised the camera again. Flash. And suddenly they understood. The secret was no longer theirs. The world had found them. And somewhere in Hollywood, a magazine editor was already preparing the headline that could destroy everything. Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley. The secret they tried to hide. But what nobody knew was that the photograph showed something far more innocent than the headline suggested. And before that photograph could ever be published, Marilyn was going to make one final decision. A decision that would determine whether the world ever saw the truth, or only the story it wanted to believe. The camera flashed. Marilyn froze. Elvis turned toward the distant road. A man stood beside his car, holding a camera. He had found them. The secret was no longer safe. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Marilyn whispered, "Elvis, I know. What do we do?" Elvis looked at her. The answer came quietly. "We tell the truth." Marilyn shook her head. "They don't want the truth." "No." He looked toward the photographer. "They want a story." And that was exactly what Hollywood wanted. A few hours later, the photograph was already being discussed inside a magazine office. Editors gathered around a table. The image was placed beneath a bright lamp. Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, standing together beside the ocean. The photograph was beautiful. But the editor didn't see beauty. He saw headlines. He saw money. He saw scandal. He saw millions of people asking the same question. What were Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley really doing together? Someone suggested a headline. Another made it more dramatic. Soon, the truth had almost disappeared beneath speculation. Marilyn saw the draft. She read the words, then quietly placed the paper down. "They don't know anything." Elvis looked at her. "They don't need to. They're going to make people believe it." He nodded. "That's what they do." Marilyn looked at him. "Then maybe we should give them something they can't twist." Elvis smiled. "What?" She looked toward the camera. "A photograph." He understood. The next morning, Marilyn and Elvis returned to the ballroom where they had first danced. It was empty. No orchestra. No guests. No cameras. Only the same polished floor beneath the chandeliers. Marilyn stood in the center. Elvis joined her. She looked around. This is where it started. Yeah. And this is where everyone thought they saw something. Elvis smiled. They didn't. What did they see? He looked at her. Two people dancing. Marilyn smiled. Exactly. Then she held out her hand. Dance with me one more time. Elvis took it. The orchestra wasn't there. So there was no music. They simply moved slowly across the empty floor. No audience. No applause. No photographers. For a few seconds, the world disappeared again. Marilyn looked at him. You know what I realized? What? We were trying so hard to hide something that wasn't a secret. Elvis smiled. What wasn't a secret? That we were lonely. He looked at her. And that we understood each other. She nodded. That's all it was. They stopped. Neither spoke. Then Elvis asked, Do you regret it? Marilyn smiled. No. Even after everything. Especially after everything. She squeezed his hand. Some moments are worth protecting. The photographer who had followed them arrived later. He expected anger. Instead, Marilyn looked at him calmly. You have the photograph. He nodded. Yes. Then give it to me. He hesitated. Why? Because you're about to let other people tell a story that isn't true. The photographer looked at Elvis. Elvis nodded. The man slowly handed over the photograph. Marilyn looked at it. It showed her standing beside Elvis near the ocean. Nothing scandalous. Nothing romantic. Just two people looking toward the water. She smiled. It's beautiful. The photographer nodded. You should keep it. Marilyn shook her head. No. She handed it to Elvis. He looked at the photograph. Then at her. What do you want me to do with it? Marilyn smiled. Nothing. He understood. They didn't need to publish it. They didn't need to explain themselves. They didn't need to prove anything. Elvis folded the photograph carefully, then placed it inside his jacket. And together they walked away. The magazine never published the photograph. The editor was furious. But without the image, the story collapsed. Rumors appeared, then disappeared. Hollywood moved on to another scandal. Another star. Another headline. Another photograph. And eventually, people forgot. But Marilyn and Elvis never forgot that night. They never needed to explain what had happened. Because they knew. It wasn't an affair. It wasn't a secret romance. It wasn't some forbidden Hollywood relationship. It was simply a moment when two people who were constantly surrounded by strangers found someone who understood their loneliness. And perhaps that was more powerful than romance. Years later, in this fictional story, the photographer from the first night opened an old drawer. Inside was the original photograph, the one he had promised to destroy. He looked at it one final time. Marilyn smiling at Elvis. Elvis looking back at her. He turned it over. The words were still there. They looked relieved. He smiled. Then he placed the photograph beside another. The second photograph. The one from the ocean. Two images. Two moments. Two people. He stared at them. Then something strange happened. he noticed a small, handwritten sentence on the back of the second photograph. He hadn't written it. It was Marilyn's handwriting. Only 5 words. Some moments belong to us. The photographer finally understood. The photographs didn't need to be famous. They didn't need to be published. They simply needed to survive. Not for Hollywood. For the people inside them. And perhaps that is why this fictional story remains so powerful. Because if Marilyn Monroe and Elvis Presley had ever danced together, the world would probably have wanted a scandal. It would have wanted romance. It would have wanted secrets. It would have wanted something spectacular. But maybe the truth would have been much simpler. 2 legends met. 2 lonely people recognized each other. They danced. They laughed. They talked. And for a few precious minutes, they forgot their names. Marilyn Monroe wasn't Marilyn Monroe. Elvis Presley wasn't Elvis Presley. They were simply Marilyn and Elvis. 2 human beings standing beneath a chandelier, surrounded by hundreds of people. Yet finally feeling less alone. And perhaps that is the photograph Hollywood never saw. Not the photograph of 2 stars dancing. The photograph of 2 people finally being themselves. Because some moments are too precious to become headlines. Some memories are too personal to become history. And sometimes, the most unforgettable photograph is the one the world never gets to see. 2 legends. 1 impossible dance. And a moment that belonged only to them. Maybe that's why, even after all these years, we still want to believe it happened. Because somewhere inside every famous face, there is still a person who simply wants to be seen. Not by millions. Not by cameras. Just by one person. And for one imaginary night. Marilyn Monroe found that person. Elvis Presley found her. And Hollywood never got the photograph.